flow vis. It's like a paint that's mixed with a paraffin, and it's a luminous paint, and basically you cover the car in it. They cover the front wing, the complete left-hand side of Felipe Massa's car. Now when he goes out on the track, that flow vis will get washed off the surface, and it'll get washed down the side of the car. And basically what it's to do is to actually sort of identify where the airflow off the front wing, where it's going to, where it reattaches itself to the side pods of the car. Because you have to understand the aerodynamic flow of the car if you're ever going to try and optimize it. Now this gives you the flow on the surface. It means that you can sort of understand the surface flow a bit better. Other people use what's called an aero rake, and that stands off the surface and measures the airspeed and airflow away from the surface of the car. So it's all about understanding. Before you can do any development, you must understand it. Yeah, just down, obviously McLaren are a team that haven't done as well this year as they wanted to, but just looking at Jenson Button's car here, it's going up in stands, and you can just see how they actually do it. They've got these air jacks at the front of the car, one at the front, one at the back, and this is probably a 700 kilogram car at the moment with fuel and whatever in it, and this little air jack just takes it up there effortlessly. One guy on each end of the car, and it lands on its stand so they can work on it a bit easier. They've obviously got something they're trying to do underneath the car, which means it has to go up in there. Normally you wouldn't be doing this in this session, but we'll keep an eye to see what happens. But if we look down here at the front wing of the car, there's a couple lying outside the garage. You can just see the detail of this front wing now. Obviously it's what I call a three element. There's a main element, and then there's two flaps behind it. And part of that flap adjustment means that you adjust the angle of the front wing to get the balance of the car you want. But the car always produces more downforce the more front wing angle you have on it. So you just have to make sure you're on the maximum angle possible. And if you have a car that the rear end of the car is nervous on the way into corners, what you'll normally do is back off the front wing. Then you lose downforce overall and you lose performance. Now, McLaren apparently have a lot of parts here. I haven't seen many of them yet. Because normally you get a baseline with your old parts here, but I think they have a new front wing and nose assembly, so we'll keep an eye on it over the weekend. Yes, you're looking at Jenson's car coming in. Obviously they've got this new bodywork on that Sam Michael was talking about, and it's the side pod area just around the exhaust pipes and the Coke bottle. They had a very, very aggressive what we call Coke bottle. In other words, the way the bodywork sweeps inside the rear tyre, and they've actually sort of eliminated a little bit of that, I think you might call it. They've made it less aggressive, realigned the exhaust pipes to work better with the rear brake ducts, and that's what they call this Coanda exhaust system. You really want to be able to get the rear downforce when you go back on the throttle pedal to exit the corner. You want to make sure that you can get as much rear downforce as possible to get better traction. Looking at the package there, that's obviously what they're trying to achieve. We'll have to wait a little bit of time and see if they've achieved it. And looking at the tyres, you know, when we looked at them in Malaysia, the tyres were really, really being used very, very hard. You know, they were really very aggressive. The rolling on the tyre was more than any other car in the pit lane. Now, looking at this set of tyres just before they put the blankets on, the tyres look a lot better. So, I think they've got themselves a package that's maybe a little bit more drivable. Early days in China yet, but I'm sure they've moved forward that little bit. He's just having a look at Lewis Hamilton coming in, and he actually did make the right pit this time. He didn't stop off at McLaren for a cup of tea, so that's a good thing. He learned something last weekend. But yeah, just having a look at the car, the detail of the car, really. I mean, there's nothing much on it that you can see from the outside. But they really have got a package here together that between him and Nico Rosberg, they're doing a good job. You know, they've obviously got to move forward. But the car itself has all the sort of fundamentals in the right place. It's a good little package. They just need to make sure they can keep the development up. Last year, obviously, China Grand Prix, Rosberg was on pole and won the race. You couldn't ask for much more than that. But by the end of the season, they fell away quite dramatically. So this season, it's got to be about being competitive, but staying competitive as the season progresses. Now, just having a look at a little bit more detail here at the front wing of their car. There's a spare one outside the garage. Last year I was fairly critical of their front wing. It was very like what McLaren are running now. It was three elements, and when you have a front wing like that that's only got three elements, when the wing gets near the ground, the airflow on the underneath of the wing stalls. It just can't keep attached to the surface, and you lose a lot of front downforce. One of the things in this car, it's got a 5-element front wing. It's much more robust to turbulent airflow behind another car. It's much less critical to the airflow separation and airflow stalling. So, that's one of the things that's taken them forward this year. But as I say, the big thing for Mercedes this year is to prove they can keep the development momentum going right through to the final race of the season. Estes car, they've just put the car up in the stands and they've taken the underfloor off it. Obviously, there's a bit of work of some sort going on there. I'll try and find out what it is, because there's a bit of panic going on around the car, to be honest. So yeah, his session may be done and dusted. But just going back to the last race for Force India, the wheel nut problem they had. You know, they came away from Australia with a very good result. For the team it was very, very good. They tried a different strategy. It sort of worked for them, and they probably got a better result than they would have done if they'd just done the same as everybody else. Come to Malaysia full of enthusiasm, and in the pit stops they had a problem with the wheel nut. Now, the wheel nut itself is actually contained inside of the wheel, and what happened was, because of Malaysia, there's a very, very big braking at the last corner, and then you come straight into the pits. And obviously the ambient temperature was very high, the brake temperatures are very high, the tyre temperatures were very high. Everything just got to that point where this aluminium sleeve that holds the wheel nut had pinched on, had sort of tightened up onto the axle of the car. And so they just couldn't get the wheel nut off, and they couldn't get it on again safely. So they had to retire both cars. But I think they have a good package here. As Adrian Siddle says, it's a very good little car. It just needs a little bit more development, and they'll be right up there. But they are, both of those guys, if they have a good day, they're definitely into the top 10 of qualifying, and from there they can bring in some good points. So I think we'll see a revived Force India this year. But they've actually got one front brake duct. Lewis Hamilton's right-hand brake duct, or the left-hand brake duct that I'm looking at, it has got holes in the top of it to let some of the heat out, whereas the right-hand front brake duct doesn't. Now, that's sometimes because the tyre temperatures don't come up equally. You want to get some of that hot air out of the brakes. The air that's coming out of these brakes is up around 700 degrees, 700, maybe even 800 degrees. So it can help warm the tyre up pretty quickly. And you need to get both front tyres up to the right sort of temperature very quickly. So he'll be going out again I think he's going out in the soft tyre next, the yellow sidewall. So it'll be interesting to see what these two Mercedes cars can do with it, because the softer the tyre, the more traction you get. It doesn't always make a better lap time because it can induce some understeer. So we just have to wait and see that all the cars can actually make the best use out of the softer tyre. But yeah, I'm just in front of Sebastian Vettel's car here, and we're seeing something that normally we don't see very much of. On the front, the barge boards, an area in front of the radiator intake which turns the airflow underneath the front of the chassis and brings it out around the side of the car. It's a very important part for creating downforce. But what we're seeing at the minute is one of the mechanics, or two of the mechanics, is actually cutting the top of the barge board off. They're grinding it into more of a knife edge. Now, what happens with these parts of the bodywork is that it sets up a vortex. If you have a very sharp corner, it sets up a vortex. It generates a sort of swirling action in the airflow, and that makes much higher energy airflow. But I've never seen somebody trying to create it in the middle of a garage, in the middle of a session, and especially Red Bull. One guy's working each side of the car, so they're definitely trying to get this barge board to work much more efficiently. It may just be something that a telephone call back from Milton Keynes has said, look, we found this little bit and it really works quite well, and they've decided to do it.